Hi, everyone. This is Kate Stevens. Welcome back to another episode of The Omnichannel Marketer. Today I have Scout Brisson joining us from Dessois. Hi, Scout. How are you?
Hi, I'm great. So excited to be here.
Likewise, I'm excited to chat. So why don't we just start with your background, a little bit more about Dessois and how you came to be in the role that you're in.
Yeah, absolutely. So Dessois launched January 2022, so a little over a year ago. I joined our two co-founders, Katie Perry and Morgan McLaughlin, in the fall of 2021. So a few months before we launched. Morgan and Katie had been working on the brand since 2020. So really, they when they first met, Morgan, quick note on her background. She's a master distiller. She's been creating products in the beverage alcohol space for most of her career. Really a visionary when it comes to what the products are today. But they were both pregnant for the first time, so obviously in a life stage where they could not enjoy alcohol, but didn't want to miss out on the fun and the complexity and sophistication of what you get in your glass of wine or evening cocktail. And so that's really where it was born. I would say going back to kind of my background, and of course we'll talk a lot more about Dessois, but I was really excited when I met them because I think, like a lot of us, I started drinking more during the pandemic. That glass of wine was really a ritual for me that marked the end of my day. And I think I always saw it as an invitation to linger and enjoy, dinner or friends or whatever that kind of evening moment was. And I think coming out of the pandemic, just a lot of us saw that, didn't necessarily for me align with my actual wellness lifestyles and values. And so when I first was chatting with the two of them and got super excited about the category and the idea, it was like, okay, the product has to click. And it was totally a light bulb moment when I drank it, and just got me super excited about what the opportunity is to, I think, satisfy for people who are looking for it. But going back to my story, I had, prior to Dessois, I'd started my own business also in consumer packaged goods, edible cookie dough enhanced with adaptogens, a brand called Dough that lives on today. I've certainly been passionate about the functional food and beverage space, and was really excited that adaptogens are also a part of the Dessois story. And then prior to Dough, I really spent time in the venture and consulting worlds. I was at a consumer fund helping to launch new brands out of their in-house incubator, and then started off my career at McKinsey. Out in Our whole team is out in LA, so I'm an East Coaster at heart, but really do love being out in the West Coast. And again, I think just getting to live the lifestyle of most days sunshine.
Mm. It's really interesting that you talk about the brand being born out of their discovery and pregnancy because I actually personally discovered the non-alc space when I was pregnant also and just looking for that ritual. And so started experimenting and looking for like beverages that were non-alc but still gave you that experience. So that was my own entry point into the space. And I know, something that we've talked about before is that Dessois is in category creation. So,
Yes.
I'd love to, understand more about like what that means to you and then how that equates to the way you're building your brand and the channels that you're, ultimately going to sell through.
Yeah. No, I love this question. One, because I don't think going into it, I realized how challenging it is to build a new category. It's challenging and rewarding. I think it's a little bit of the craziness that we have in us starting, doing the whole startup thing to begin with. Um, but really, what I think it comes down to is education, and education at every touch point in the funnel. And when we first launched, we were initially very focused on direct to consumer. That was really a product of a few different things, strategically understanding who is our consumer, how do we communicate, like as simple as like, what are the taglines that we use, right? And being able to test that through paid ads. Obviously being able to activate Katie's audience, but also paired with the fact that, I'd say non-alc still has not reached its peak maturity, right? In terms of presence in retail or on premise. And so I think a big part of that D2C focus up front, which we gained and learned so much knowledge, was also time, that we were able to then be starting to have those conversations that obviously we're still having a ton of today on the retail side primarily and distributor side, where we're educating, right? We're talking about what is the product? Where does it fit in? What does it replace? What is it going to taste like? How does this live in the store? What are other brands that live on shelf next to us? Who do we want to live on shelf next to us, right? And then kind of doing that. It's like earlier today, we just, kicked off work with a new broker, and it's like, okay, we're having that conversation again. And I think people are coming into the funnel at such different points. And it's very different talking to, let's say, like a venture capital investor than it is talking to a retail buyer. And so how do you think about education at every kind of touch point until it gets to the consumer hands?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you're educating the investors, the buyers, ultimately how it will be displayed in store, but then you're also educating the consumers. And so are those different types of educations, or how do you think about that?
Yeah, so I think let's start with the consumer. On shelf, you have a lot less opportunity than you do through D2C, right, to have that conversation. So we are, as an example, we're taking a lot of our learnings about, how do we communicate flavor and taste, and we're implementing that in a packaging kind of evolution that will go live in the coming months. And so I think that is just a perfect example of like taking those learnings, but also the in-person moments, right? Like our head of sales did, like when he first came on board, he's like, I want to do all of the demos myself because I want to learn as much as possible from your consumer himself. And that was the channel that he felt like he could have those conversations. But then take, for instance, when we're talking to a retail buyer, the conversation might just start with, what is somebody replacing this with? Do they drink alcohol, right? Like, who are they? And where does it live in my store? And so the education is, I think, a lot more focused on less about taste because they've tasted the product, right? Like that's been a part of the experience, and more on use case occasion, which we also have to do with our consumer, but we do a lot of that like visually with the consumer.
Mm-hmm. So, I know you started as a digital native brand, which has allowed you to, really lean into that education. How do you see the brand evolving, and, what are some of the channels of focus going forward?
I think this will continue to just mirror, I like to think like whatever the landscape and environment looks like. And today, ultimately, people are shopping this category like broadly beverage in store. I think that as the brand grows, we will continue to leverage D2C as a place to learn, cultivate that relationship with our customer, really have that direct line of feedback with really loyal subscribers and repeat customers. But then I think just continue to grow our presence, certainly on shelf, but then also in the bar, restaurant, hotel environment. And the way I think about this is like this incredible flywheel of, okay, we launched D2C, that input goes into retail. We can use a lot of that data in, conversations when we're saying, hey, what regions, right, should we focus on first when you're talking to a chain that has a national presence? And then if you build it on premise, right, you can create a lot of trial and discovery so that next time someone sees it on shelf, there's a little bit of a halo around it. And then maybe they fall in love and they, have seen a bunch of ads because they said just want to their phone and now they're getting targeted with them. And so like, there's just this really, I think, virtuous cycle that ends up happening where you're hitting that kind of golden rule of 7 from a marketing lens, that they're getting it on Instagram, or they're getting it on shelf, or they're seeing it at their like favorite restaurant menu.
And, as you think about this new category of, non-alc, how much does it mirror like the existing category of alcohol, and like that distribution? Like, is it liquor stores, or is there actually, different types of opportunities that exist in the non-alc space, because you don't have the 3-tier system? How do you think about what that looks like differently?
Yeah, I'd say we get the best of both worlds and also the worst of both worlds in some ways. I think what this kind of at its core comes down to is your distribution footprint. And we work with spirits distributors. We also work with, broadliners like Unify and KeHE. And that enables us to reach more places than, to your point, a typical, call it, 1-year-old alcohol brand could reach. But it simultaneously creates a little bit of additional complexity. And so right now, I think we're like, as we think about kind of channel strategy, we're staying flexible to what is in the environment, whereas the consumer, it's the same idea here. It's like, okay, who is the visionary from a distribution perspective? And we have presence in liquor stores because, again, like our customers drink alcohol and they might be looking to make that bar cart swap. But then we also have presence in places that don't carry alcohol at all. And I think that's a wonderful thing, because that opens up a whole world of opportunity, not just for us, but again, going back to like that kind of in-between customer of the retail buyer who, maybe they sit over the wine and spirits section and they're thinking about it as, here's an opportunity for me to expand my book of business.
So as you think about, a recent channel that you've either launched or are planning to launch, talk to me a little bit about how you are thinking about that, as a brand being successful and, how you're supporting that channel.
Yeah, so in January this year, we launched with GoPuff and BevMil. So for those who don't know, they really are partnered and have been for a bit now. And that's been, I think, a really exciting one for me as someone who I'd say is more e-com native as an individual than retail native, because we've been able to really partner both in terms of in-store activation. So I think about this as at least like a table stakes set of tactics that you can take, right? Liquid to lips in the form of demos, point of sale material, really thinking about any kind of promotional activity. But then we've also been able to layer on this really fun e-com component where, we can turn on, for instance, we can run a sweepstakes, right? And we can send somebody to Katie's residency and see a show in Vegas. And so I think really being able to expand outside of, just some of those kind of pay to play opportunities in store, which are super, super important, but is really fun for our team to think creatively about.
That's a ton of fun. And then, how do you think about future retail distribution and then, just setting up the business to be successful and also, bridge the gap across all of those different channels?
Yeah, I think for a lot of brands our size and stage, the classic is just we can't go too far too fast. And there's so many things at play, right? It's like, okay, you've got a celebrity involved, but you also have a new category. So that means like, okay, what parts of the country would really be ready for this? And then what are the opportunities that we're getting now versus in a year from now? And what's the right pace to move? And so I'd say that we're really focused on intentional growth and finding the people that are really looking for a product like Dessoir, and then finding where it's working and building upon that, right? And so like take for instance, BevMil or Total Wine, who we launched with last summer. It's like those accounts have been performing really well. So like how do we start to build out some more of that liquor store presence, working with spirits distributors, and we're just launching with another one in the Illinois region. And so I think just really starting to think about kind of like what's working, how do we build on that, and then how do we also, I would say, kind of create presence in some of the accounts that like we would just be able to really, really turn on the Katie power and help bring her fans and people that are really excited to try something that she created.
Yeah, actually, I'd love to chat a little bit more about being a celebrity-backed brand or celebrity-founded brand. What elements does that, like, how does that become part of your brand image, your, everything, and because I think that it's definitely a trend that we're seeing across the industry is more celebrity-backed brands. How do you think about, how that fits into Dessoir's identity?
I think, before I even go to the celebrity part of the component, like as you mentioned, right, like Dessoir was really founded by two moms and working moms. And I think that Both Morgan and Katie really enjoy alcoholic beverages. They really enjoy that experience. And so, coming back to like, okay, well, what are their goals and their missions, and how am I helping to execute both on that vision and the vision that we've created for Dessois? It is really about this idea of empowerment. And I think about this inclusivity in the experience, and kind of tie back to your question. It's like, I forget sometimes, because certainly in this whole world of non-alc, I'm in California, that there is still taboo around the idea of being sober, and we're rebranding that as sober curious. But I think a huge part of, what Katie's really excited about is like, how do we just like make this a bigger conversation about non-alc? And having a platform like Katie does to be able to do that helps with awareness. It helps with the education, right, that we're talking about. Even helps with the like, can we get someone to stop in store for a moment and pay attention, right? Like, I think it can just be that, like, I mean, right? It's so hard to stand out on shelf. And if like we can have something that's like, oh, I recognize that, that's Katy Perry. Like, that's an amazing, just like stop someone in their tracks moment to get them to like take a look and engage.
Yeah, makes complete sense. Even thinking about the packaging, Dessois itself, it's beautiful. I mean, like the colors are very unique. I think that there's an element there that plays into that stopping. It sounds like there's a packaging refresh coming. So excited to see what that next stage looks like. There's I think last time we chatted, we talked about Boisson, the non-alc specific retailer that I know Dessois has done really well in. Can you speak to your performance there, and how you think about them as a partner in what you're building?
Absolutely. Yeah, we launched with Boisson in January 2022. So it was our first retail partner. And I'd say they do such an amazing job on the education and community front. And I'd say, like, I've seen that. I mean, Boisson is a really good example, but I've seen that also with other just non-alc shops that are popping up across the country. So like, we've got the new bar here in Venice, Soft Spirits in Silver Lake out in LA, and there's so many more. And I think what's really exciting is that they are building a community, because there are people who are really passionate about the products that they're carrying. But also, if you go into the store, I mean, it is like truly an educational experience. Like, you walk in, somebody says, like, what are you looking for? They can tell you what their favorite things are. And I just see that, and I think it's so inspiring, because they can have that like IRL conversation in a way that a brand, again, unless you're like our head of sales at a demo, you just don't really get that opportunity. So such good stewards of the brands that they're carrying. And I know that we'll continue to partner with them on other really exciting kind of brand activations, like we did in January, where Katie came into the store and we got some really fun content.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah. I mean, again, like my own personal experience, like went into Busan, like had the most incredible educational experience. I was like, I'm pregnant and this is what I like. And I'd like to try some things. And I did. And they were the most amazing associates I've ever encountered. So I totally agree with that.
I think too, oh, sorry,
Mm-hmm.
cut you off.
No, please.
I think they're such a good example to me in terms of like bigger picture lesson of where are you going in store, right? Like, retail is a huge focus for us. It's a huge focus for a lot of brands, right? In the food and beverage space, like where you're putting your brand when you have less control over the narrative just matters so much, right? Like, is your brand aligned with the brand that you're launching in? Is it like, how's it going to look on shelf? How's it going to be merchandised on shelf, right? All these different pieces. And I think, Boisson is obviously very unique in what they're doing, but I think just a good kind of feed into that lesson.
Yeah. And then as, retail becomes a greater share of your business, how are you setting up the company? How are you setting up like strategy, thinking about your end-to-end experience, when you're a nationally distributed brand across, all these different retail partners?
Yeah, it's a great question, because it's something you're definitely, or I'm inferring from what you're saying, that I think a lot about even too is just team and partners, right? That you bring on as a part of that process. And since we started really D2C focused, we've got a phenomenal, digital marketing e-commerce team in house. We've got a bunch of really great agency partners. And then I think we're now starting to build out that same infrastructure on the wholesale side of the business. And so we've got our head of sales who's been really running hard at this since he joined last, I guess it was Q1 of 2022, but then also layering in, the broker that we just onboarded who can really help with some of that coverage, starting to think through with our head of brand marketing, what does it look like to do more demos at scale, right? Are we thinking about building out that like field marketing team ourselves? Do we want to use agencies and build out those demos? So I wouldn't say just yet we have that all fleshed out, but it just comes back to like, what are the conversations that you get to have with your consumer at the forefront in that like demoing experience? And, or, is it our own fleet of salespeople the way that you would see in a beverage alcohol company? I mean, I think all those things are somewhere in the future, and it's just like, when is the right point in time to really turn that on?
Yep, makes complete sense. So we were chatting, before we started recording about, how you're really passionate about in the non-alc space. So would love to, just have you like double click on that and, tell me more.
Yeah, I think this is something that has been really special for me as I've, obviously moved into this company now, since 2021, which is just the conversations that I've had with new people I meet, people that I went to high school with or college with that are reaching out, sharing their own personal story with, I haven't been drinking for 8 months, and I feel amazing and Diswa is the best one that I've tried. And I think there's, I'm just so passionate about, I think the experience and the opportunity to bring this beverage to people who are looking for it. Maybe they know that they need it. Maybe they don't even know yet, right, what they're looking for, and like filling that hole. And, we talked a little bit about like just like the taboo nature of this conversation as a starting point and how I think that's evolving and evolving so quickly. But I get really, really excited when I hear such amazing feedback, because I think that it just, I hope that like the days of adult peer pressure are going to be behind us, but I know that I still go to dinners and I am at a restaurant and there's nothing great on the menu. And I experience that moment of like, do I want something? I kind of want something sophisticated, so I'll order it. Or, oh, I don't really want anything, but I'm with this, group of people that I feel like I should be ordering something. And so I order it anyways. And so I just think that so many of us aren't talking about that, but are really, really looking for, again, certainly in that like that on-premise restaurant setting, like really want better options, and not something that's like loaded with a ton of sugar that like feels like a different hangover in its own way.
Are there, and I don't know the answer to this question, are there like efficient ways in the way there is for retail with like the UNFI and KeHEs of the world to get on-prem in a more like scalable way?
Yes and no. I'd say there are spirits distributors that have salespeople to actually go door to door, but usually they're looking to partner with someone from your team that's doing that with them and doing their own sell-in. So like there's this concept called work withs where like you're literally like going along to different accounts with that distributor and helping kind of educate them again on like what's that pitch look like and doing that pitching alongside them. And so I think that's often, when people think about just like scaling beverage and the cost of scaling beverage, that like can certainly add up. But yeah, we've been trying to be a little bit like more creative and scrappy around how we do that without adding a ton of team members.
Out of curiosity, what are scrappy ways? Because I think that is something that actually our listeners really benefit from is like these tactical, like scrappy tips. Like for example, Jake was talking about how he, has gotten a ton of his retail accounts from LinkedIn and cold LinkedIn and, LinkedIn founder brand. So any like tips you can share is super helpful.
I love that idea. But yeah, I think for us, it's been two things. One, trying to find, and this is again, very patchwork, but like, can we work with salespeople on a commission basis where they've got multiple brands that they're selling in? So really thinking about, take San Diego, for instance, like we have a partner there and she's got a book of brands, not that are competitive with Diswa, but like is really passionate herself about non-alc. And so she's opening up doors alongside our distributor. So thinking through that, and then kind of like what you mentioned that Jake does, but as you can imagine, we have this amazing network of, it's like working with CAA, working with Katie and her team. It's like they all go to these incredible restaurants that we'd be so excited to have De Swan. And so just like leveraging warm introductions, right? Like, can we get a warm introduction to the general manager, the beverage director of their favorite restaurant, or their client's favorite restaurant, and really kind of push in that way. And so I'd say that's been the approach thus far. And then, this is less about on-prem, but we've just also had a ton of success in opening up direct accounts through Faire, Faire, that I think a lot of, up and coming brands are leveraging, but it's an amazing discovery platform. I think you get a ton of independent accounts that kind of like Boisson just really care about the brands that they're carrying and want to have that curated selection. So they're going out of their way, right, to source it themselves. And so that's been one that, we've opened, hundreds of doors through that channel, and they've just continued to blow me away in terms of their partnership as well.
Wow. I didn't know that was a resource for beverage or CPG. So that's super, super interesting. Awesome. Well, moving into our lightning round. So just like, quick answers. Favorite omni-channel brand?
Ooh, my team and I have been obsessed with Simple Mills. Like, we cannot keep the office stocked with their almond flour crackers fast enough.
Yeah, they do have great food. What do you want to change most about our industry?
I'd say the amount of female-led, women-led brands that receive venture capital funding.
Double click on that one.
Yeah.
Favorite podcast?
I have to confess, I listen to Normal Gossip, which has been my favorite podcast recently, and it just fills that void of normal gossip in your life. So if you haven't listened, definitely check it out.
I will. I haven't listened, and I love that idea. Favorite newsletter?
Nick Sharma has an amazing D2C focused newsletter.
Yeah, his gets a shout out here a lot. Favorite book?
Certainly in the last year, Maybe You Should Talk to Someone, which is written by a therapist, talks about her own therapy experience as well as her patients. And I will say, I love anything that is mental health focused, and also sparked my own conversation with my own therapist after reading that book.
Also read that book. Also think it's incredible and super thoughtful. Favorite social media channel?
TikTok.
Yeah, it's so addicting.
It's a wormhole, but it's great.
And then event that you're excited about going to this year?
Okay, I'm going to cheat on this question and say an event I just went to. I was at an amazing Women in Beverage offsite last week, and it was incredibly fulfilling, an awesome group of people, and great programming. So just felt really special to be a part of.
That's amazing. Who like hosted that or brought that together?
Claire Anderson at Cougar Point Partners, and Jeff Craigle, who's at Bernstein.
Amazing. Scout, thank you so much. Where can our listeners connect with you?
Well, you can find De Swan at drinkdeswa.com, or on Instagram, drinkdeswa.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
If you liked this podcast, follow me and the Bridge page on LinkedIn and Twitter for hot takes and tactical advice. If you really loved today's episode, we'd love a review on the podcasting platform of your choice, Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Thanks for listening.